Oh, we all need some lovin' in this world. We all need some lovin' in this world. You can look high and low, but there's no place else to go. We all need some lovin' in this world. Hello. Hello. I went to the gym today. I went to the gym today, and my arms are very tired. Eggs D, good to see you, my man. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well out there. Um, because I have a friend who actually has access to a yard, and so I asked her yesterday, "Hey, you want to plant a garden?" And she was like, "Yeah, let's plant a garden." And she's always planting gardens. She's always done that, so she knows what she's up to. But her gardens are usually very small because it's usually just her doing it. And I'm like, if I helped, like if I showed up every Monday and helped you with this garden, how big do you think we could get it? And she was like, pretty big. So we're going to plant a garden. And I suggest that everybody plant a garden. I think that every little bit will count on this kind of thing. And I think that that is the way forward, and that's the serious thing that we should actually start doing. The Captain, good to see you over on Twitch. And that's going to help with my mental anxiety. Mental anxiety. Mental anxiety. Mental anxiety. Mental anxiety. Mental anxiety for the future. Eggs D writes, I'm getting a lot of these ads saying donate to these poor Palestinians, but never address Israel's role in this genocide. Yeah, they're trying to do like a double thing on you, right? Like they're trying to be like, look at the Biden administration sending all this aid, right? We built that pier to send aid for sure. Let's send some aid over there. And of course, it's like, it's just subterfuge. It's just subterfuge. I almost guarantee, like, and I don't want to be like 100% on this because it might not be the case. But I almost guarantee that if you were to actually dig into these like charitable organizations, send Palestine aid, right? So you donate to this organization to send Palestine aid, and it probably just sends money directly to the IDF, right? Yeah, we're going to send money to the IDF and then they'll distribute aid. That's what it's going to do, right? The IDF will buy the aid, right? We'll just send it over to Israel, and they'll just go to the grocery store and buy some aid for the Palestinians that they're committing a genocide against. Because they can't get a bill pushed through Congress to actually send direct aid anymore because it's like a total political disaster. It's like total pariah, and it might actually lead to like serious lawsuits and serious legislation against some of these guys. So they're like setting up non-profit organizations to just dupe gullible people in a like Nigerian Prince style scam, right? Gabriel, how you doing? Howdy, do you like Bob Marley? Um, I mean, I'm from like rural Manitoba. Here's a real thing, right? That has happened in my life. I got into a band with somebody who like really loved reggae music and I think really connected to reggae music, and so they wanted to do like reggae music, but and I'm like a pretty astute musician, so I can like do it, but reggae does not live in my soul. It is just not. Like, I listen to Bob Marley and I listen to these guys, and I'm like, I understand why you are popular, and I understand why you're important, and I understand all that. But, like, that is not the music in my soul. It is just like, do 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 boom boom. Don't worry, boom 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 about a thing, but do do but do 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 but do every little thing, it's gonna be all right, right? Like I get it. Yeah, everyone has their thing that resonates with them. Yeah, and you know what it is for me? Straight up, it's just good old country music. That's what it is. It's John Denver, right? Country road, take me home to the place I belong. Right? Like that's the type of thing that's gonna some good old Garth Brooks. And the thunder rolls, bow, 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 ba da bow, bow, and the thunder rolls, right? Just, I'm a country boy. I'm from a country province. I was inundated with country music, and everybody around me. My father sang in a country gospel quartet. He still does country gospel music. So, like, it's in my blood, and I can't do nothing about it. Someone over Odra Chess. I don't know if I've ever seen you before, Odra Chess. I think probably I have. But good to see you in either case. Good, strong, solid comment with a hey. With a hey diddle diddle and a ho ho ho. Dee 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 dee. Anytime I go to the gym, I end up being very musical. I get very, like, musical and singy. I don't know what it is. So I think I'll start with the funny thing that's going on, because it's so stupid, right? So the liberal government comes out and says, we're going to pass a tenants' bill of rights. What we're going to do is we're going to make it so that people can, renters, their rent will go to their credit score, as if we want these parasitical landlords to have control of our credit scores. And everybody on TikTok and everybody on the social media was like, oh my goodness, what a great idea. The liberals are doing something. It's great what they're doing. Oh my God, it's so good that we're letting landlords have access to our credit system. Yeah, that's a good idea. But then it turns around and from the Toronto Star, tenant rents should be counted towards their credit score, the federal government says, but it won't force the move. So it's literally just them standing up and be like, we would like to do a thing. And everybody going, they're going to do a thing. And then it turns out that they're not doing a thing at all. Right? So it's just like a fart. It's just like a fart joke of a story that, like, got everybody into, like, a little minor tizzy for a moment. So that maybe when election season comes along, people will be like, well, they said they wanted to do a thing that I liked. Right? Odra Chess asks, what is tenants? If you rent from a landlord, you're a tenant, right? So, like, if you are renting your apartment, you are a tenant. You're a tenant of that apartment. You got it, bud. I understand. So, I just think it's so hilarious to see how, like, everyone, I think, is just so desperate. So just overwhelmingly desperate for any shred of good news. And everybody wants to believe in their heart of hearts, right? I see it all the time. It's happening constantly, all the time. I watch it happen. I can see people who don't want to take the plunge as I have taken the plunge and just accept that the system of electoral politics is never going to do anything worthwhile. Right? It is a failed system. And everybody just wants to believe. They want to sit there and be like, maybe there's an electoral solution. Maybe the people who we vote for will actually do something. And so when they pretend to do something, everybody goes, and then it's nothing. It's just absolutely nothing. Eric writes, evening, I'm currently reading that article you posted on the Discord. I knew we were fucked. I didn't realize how fucked we were. Yeah, the part that I didn't know was the farce behind renewable energy. Yeah, I kind of knew about it, but that guy, like, really drove the nail into the coffin. Right? And Eric, I read through that article in yesterday's stream, so if you want to listen to it as opposed to read it, I read through the whole thing. I skipped some bits at the beginning because I don't think that this crew needs to be convinced that climate change is real, right? I didn't think that we needed to, like, go through the very specific, very, like, well, if you're on section 4, you're about halfway through. So continuing the absolute fart joke that is Canadian politics, right now in Canada, if you haven't been paying attention to Canadian politics, right now in Canada, so much political capital and so much political energy is being spent on the carbon tax. If you go to liberal subreddits or if you go to liberal places, they're rah-rah liberals, right? And if you go to and they're defending the carbon tax for what it is and all this kind of stuff. You get an article like this from a liberal subreddit. And if you go to the right-wing subreddits, you end up with the carbon tax is a woke agenda, right, and all this. And so Bruce Arthur, who is a columnist that I have come to see as being a straight shooter, that's kind of why I like him, right? Anytime Bruce Arthur's name is on something, I'm like, oh, this is probably just going to be very straightforward, which I think is lacking in the discourse generally. I think there's usually a lot of like speaking for the sake of speaking and a lot of just filling space that happens most of the time. A lot of obfuscation, purposeful or otherwise, or just like, you know, dimwits who are just like, oh, I'd like to be published in the Toronto Star, sure. So it's nice when there's a guy who's like, this is what happened, right? And that's Bruce Arthur. Pierre Poilievre says one thing, 200 experts refute it. Who to believe? I also admire the kind of like, the sort of snide sarcasm that he has. Canadian economists signed a letter this week addressing the main arguments against carbon pricing. Here's what they said, why they matter. Now, let me be real clear before I get on with this. I don't think the carbon tax matters at all, right? Like, that's what's so funny about this whole thing in general, is that the carbon tax is like the tiniest little itsy bitsy, most insignificant. Most European nations already have carbon taxes, right? Carbon taxes are actually not like, they're not controversial at all. And of course, the liberal argument is like, carbon taxes are the number one way by which we fight against carbon crimes. It's just like, not really. Like, not really, right? Like, they'll reduce emissions, but they haven't. Like, emissions haven't gone down at all, right? Like, they don't, like, they work better than nothing, but, you know, that's like saying if we take a thimble with holes in it and use that to start throwing water out of this boat that is dramatically sinking like the Titanic, then that's better than nothing. And the fact that we're having like a fight over the carbon tax, the fact that we're sitting there actually fighting over the carbon tax, and that people are drawing up defenses and there's statements being made in Parliament and people are rallying against the climate, the carbon tax. It's just like the most dim-witted shit of life. It's just like the most dim-witted shit of life. Just me. Good to see you. Hit the like button. Share. Subscribe. Do the thing. Do the thing. Make me rich. Rich and famous. Well, I don't care about rich or famous, but like, just spread the good word. Do what you're doing. That's the number one thing, right? Like, yes, hitting the like button is important. It fights against the algorithm. Hit the subscribe button. It fights against the algorithm and notifies you when I show up and all that kind of stuff. And please donate to my Patreon, right? If only to make me feel good about myself. Every time somebody does, I go, oh, it makes me feel good about myself. But the number one thing that you can do to support this channel is just tell someone I exist. Tell people I exist. When you see somebody being like, do you know any good podcasts? Do you know any good... yes, you do. Yes, you certainly do. And and then also plant a garden. That's the number one thing you can actually do if you want to make me more sane. Milo. Milo's got a little toy full of peanut butter. Milo's such a good little dog. He's better than the others. He's a cute little dog with a little face. I like to kiss him all over the place. Because he's a sweet, 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 sweet little dog. Because he's my sweet, 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 sweet little dog. Here you go, buddy. He's losing his little mind. He just got like a little peanut butter treat. So he's just like over the moon right now. And of course, after he finishes with the peanut butter treat, he's going to look at me and be like, where are more? More. Do you have bipartisanism in Canada like us? I don't know if I understand the question. All of the parties are capital parties. They work for the same people, for the same interests. So, like the United States. Transylvanian, good to see you. Good to see you. Eric writes, I remember reading carbon taxes in my economics textbook, and I remember thinking this is just a farce. It was at the time when I wasn't as politically active. I mean, like, it makes a type of sense, but it's very clear that it just doesn't work. Transylvanian writes, liberals are stuck in a tiny mental box, where the only way they can conceive of the state doing anything is through taxes and subsidies and the occasional tweaking of interest rates. Yeah. Well, they've completely bought into the privatization of the system, right? That like it's not about taking the system over; it's about incentivizing the private system of ownership, right? That you can't actually nationalize anything or take anything over or do it directly, right? You just need to create incentive structures to incentivize the psychopaths to operate in a certain way, right? Yeah, the idea that the state could actually do something substantial and direct instead of merely playing with these economic levers is inconceivable to them. Yeah, because it would affront their owners, right? They have owners. Those owners are private capital, right? And the private capital owners, they're not gonna they're not going to continue supporting these liberals. Like if a liberal started to act in a way that was rational, then they would get abandoned by their owners, and the owners would fund conservatives, which is more or less what you're seeing today. Yep. No, they'll absolutely go through this farce of the carbon tax. Are you kidding? They're never going to nationalize the energy industry. Like we'll see enormous crises happen before they even start to talk about that. The top issue facing Canada right now, right, which is such a joke. It's a joke that it is the top issue, if you ask Canadians, is affordability. Oh, well, affordability, sure. Carbon tax, I thought was what he was going to say. Okay, I got to stop commenting before I actually finish things. The top issue facing Canadians right now, if you ask Canadians, is affordability. Inflation rose and is falling to a new, higher floor. Housing costs are at the end of the fuse on a time bomb. It's tough out there for a lot of people. Look around. So governments must find solutions, or at least be seen to try. And the number one topic has somehow become the carbon tax. Axe the tax, the opposing conservatives say. They say Trudeau's carbon tax has forced Canadians to choose between heating their home and putting food on the table, which, he literally wrote the word, I love this guy, which, isn't true. Nevertheless, the Conservatives have hammered this message. In Ontario, Premier Doug Ford has also linked it to affordability, and Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie has run from the idea of a carbon tax in response. Several provinces are opposing the April 1st increase, and the Prime Minister is firing back. Rebates rise with the price, though in fairness, paying up front and having to wait for your money back in April can pinch in harder times. But Pierre Poilievre's party is driving this exhaust-spewing bus. Affordability. Axe the tax. It's largely opportunistic nonsense, unfortunately. That idea that the Conservatives are fighting for the working class on this, I mean, you're not, says Andrew Leach, a professor of law and economics at the co-director for the Institute for Public Economics at the University of Alberta. You're fighting for the people who have a material benefit from the removal of carbon pricing, which are people above that 70% or 80% income line. For the middle, it's a rounding error. To the bottom, removing the carbon tax is a big loss. And they're getting away with saying we're doing this for the poor, and it's insanity. One professor, you might say. We can find economics professors who say the carbon tax isn't worth the cost, and who write op-eds whose argument boil down to CO2 is good for plants. Well, what about more than 200 Canadian economists? Because that's how many signed a letter this week addressing the main arguments against carbon pricing. That it doesn't affect emissions, for instance. It does, according to at least 2 reports, at a lower cost than alternative approaches. Let's take a look at these reports, by the way. The letter also counters the argument that the tax drives up the cost of living as a big factor in inflation, and it doesn't make sense to offer both carbon prices and rebates, that it harms Canadian business competitiveness, and that carbon pricing isn't necessary at all. See the scattershots? Like, this is one of the strategies of liars. When you're dealing with liars, right, they do what I like to call a scattershot strategy. Just shoot like a bunch of lies, and one of them is sure to stick, right? Because it takes a long time to debunk all of the lies. Baldy McNose hair, Jib Jabby, good to see you. Yeah, dude, yesterday's stream was a hard one. For sure it was. And I'll talk about that if you'd like. Because, like, boy howdy, that was a tough one. The letter reads, "Healthy public debate is good, but it should be based on sound evidence and facts." Sound evidence and facts and conservatism? I don't know, you guys. A capitalist basing what they think and believe on sound evidence and facts? I don't think they can. I just don't think they can. Any attempt to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is going to reduce economic activity, said Stephen Gordon of the Université de Laval, who, like Leach, is a signatory. The thing about the carbon tax is it has the least bad effect on economic activity. Assuming a shared priority of reduced emissions in a warming world, and it's clear not everyone shares that view, the letter is a reminder of why Canada chose the carbon pricing route. The letter is no wholesale endorsement of the Liberals, as many of the signers made clear. Gordon, for instance, is one of the many critics of the move last year to carve out home heating oil from the tax across the country. No. This is about objective reality. Expertise basically goes, famous expert says, then the story ends here, says Gordon. They don't say, why does famous expert say this? What's the logic? What's the reasoning behind the argument? This letter is an attempt. It's hard to do it in 800 words for people who don't have the background in very general terms. It's perhaps worrying that the state of debate in Canada has reached the point where a huge group of experts feel the need to stage what is essentially an expertise intervention. The Liberals failed to properly explain the policy before they undercut it. The Conservatives decided to act as though the rebates don't exist, and that evidence on the carbon tax significantly increases inflation. Admittedly, sometimes it's nice to pretend. But, while something like an expert consensus is welcome, can we even properly listen to expertise anymore? Poilievre has already called some of the country's leading housing experts failed liberal academics when they criticized his party's plan, and his opinions on the media is well known. And the Conservative Party is following. Hard. The Liberals, meanwhile, have been late to the game when it came to listening to expertise on, say, the collision of immigrants and the housing crisis, and ended up undermining their own policy, opening the door to the growing rumblings of discontent towards Canada's high level of much-needed newcomers. Ideally, a letter like this would be considered seriously. In a nation of big challenges, facts and expertise should be welcome. But as partisan policy leads towards ever sharper sticks, it's hard to imagine, isn't it? Poilievre may assail the ivory tower eggheads, and the Liberals have already taken the letter as a full endorsement, which it isn't. Listening to nonpartisan expertise is a sign of a healthy society. Is that us? The answer is no. The answer is definitely not. We're definitely not. We're bickering over this carbon tax, which has, the smallest, most meager impact ever. Hold on. This guy said at one point, he quoted something. Where did it disappear to? It disappeared somewhere. Hold on. I'm going to find it. 2 reports. Click. Canadian Climate Institute. 39-page document. Probably not going to Emissions Reduction Plans Progress Report. And finds that emissions today would be 7% higher and 41% higher in 2030, absent legislated, developing, and announced policies, to reach the country's legislated target for 2030. All this hubbub for 7%. Although they said 41%. That's not nothing, but it's just it's just so lame that we're just I think the thing about it that's so laughable is the conservatives, right? What is it that they are conserving? Because you would think it would be in the interest of a conservative party to conserve the land, the soil, the air, the water, that they would be interested in conserving Canada as a successful unit, that they would look at climate change and go, oh shit, that's a serious thing. So what is it that they are conserving? And the answer is that they are conserving a psychopathic system that's destroying us. Because What's the name of the channel? Capitalism is a death cult. Capitalism is a death cult. It's a fucking death cult, and they're not going to do anything about it. And it's just like a joke at this point. Like, it's just a hilarious kind of a fart joke at this point to watch the conservatives and the liberals bicker like children over like a 7%, right? It's a 7% cut, or even a 41% cut in 2030. Like, by 2030. Like, it's just so annoying. Like, we're such an annoying people to buy into this dumb bullshit constantly. Milo, you're done with the peanut butter, okay? I knew you were going to do this. Boink, boink. I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to be like, Jonathan, I had the peanut butter, and then the peanut butter is gone, and I need more peanut butter. Jonathan, where is it? Where is it, Jonathan? Well, there's no more, my man. You ate it all. I know, the tragedy. The tragedy of the snuffling pug. What are you guys talking about? Why go? Yeah. In other words, it's just another argument for cutting taxes, which always fails. Yeah. It may not be because of the carbon tax, but people are increasingly having to choose between heating and food thanks to the general degradation of the condition of the working class under capitalism. Yeah, as is the strategy, as is the goal, right? It's extraction and abandonment, and they're accelerating it. Kaz, I don't know if I've ever seen you in here, Kaz. If I have, it's been sporadic. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Like, share, and subscribe, Kaz. I'm doing it just for you. Tell people I exist. A 10-second lie takes a 10-minute explanation to disprove. Yeah. Actually, your scattershot analogy has a logical fallacy name called gaslighting. I mean, I guess those two are linked, right? Where gaslighting is about convincing the other person that they're the crazy one, right? Like, while you're the obvious offender. Right, it's a manipulation tactic, right? That comes from a play called Gaslight, where the villain of the piece is trying to convince his spouse that she's actually just going crazy as he goes out and commits nefarious crimes, and she begins to suspect him of these crimes because she sees one of the lights, a gas light, go up, change and shift when he leaves, right? So so gaslighting is about convincing the other person that they're the so a good example of gaslighting that's happening within the confines of this conversation is oh, you care about climate change, well, what are you doing to reduce your emissions, right? That's a form of gaslighting, right? That's gaslighting. Because we know who's actually the guilty party, right? The top 1%, the people in the top 10% of the wealth bracket do like 50 to 60% of the pollution, right? They are obviously the offenders. In a very black and white, super, super obvious. So when you say, like, it'd be like Jason Voorhees being surrounded by corpses, being like, what are you doing to prevent murders? Right? And then expecting people to be like, oh, well, I don't murder people very often, and all that. And it's just a distraction tactic that's based in gaslighting. You're flipping the script on somebody else and making them defend themselves from your original accusation, right? So it's gaslighting. Whereas what I'm talking about is it's subtly different, which is, you're not accusing the other person and putting them on the defensive in that same way. You're just scattershotting. It's like a smoke screen, right? It's just tell 10 lies, right? And just in rapid succession, dunk, 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 which puts them in a position where they have to defend all of these lies and debunk all of these lies and deal with all of this stuff. And astute people will just stride through it. They'll literally just be like, nonsense. Here's the truth. Right, but a less astute person will get caught up in it and start to defend, and all of a sudden, by the time they debunk all the stuff, well, the liar has moved on to something else, and it takes so long, and you need to like draw up a bunch of stuff. So it's a strategy. It's which exists in the same kind of place as gaslighting, as long as it works, right? That's the thing. Transylvanian writes, wasn't there even something about an RCMP report about how Canada's security state is preparing to fend off mass uprisings in the future due to youth who are increasingly seeing no economic prospects? Yes, we recorded that. We recorded that here and reported on that here. And yeah, the RCMP is getting ready for it, right? And of course, the strategy is just police, right? It's just militarization. They're not going to do anything by way of like policy alleviation, right? When these crises begin and when they become serious, the strategy is extraction and abandonment, right? They're going to throw people into the streets. There's going to be mass homelessness. There's going to be major crises. There's going to be major problems, and the only thing that the system of capital will fund is police, right? And it's just like clear. It's just like very obvious what's going on, and so we need to just walk into that eyes open, well aware. Start planting gardens, start being prepared for the abandonment, because it's going to happen, right? It's their strategy. It's what they're obviously planning to do. If they weren't planning to do that, then they wouldn't be militarizing the police force and funding massive police initiatives and creating military outposts everywhere, creating cop cities everywhere. Passing legislation in order to militarize police force, giving police force extrajudicial power and all kinds of stuff like this, right? They would be doing lots of other things, but they're not doing anything else, right? Literally the only thing they're doing is increasing police budgets. So it's like very obvious what their strategy is. And so so chances are good that as we move into the future and as the system collapses, as the system of global capital collapses, and as we enter kind of this new phase of neo-feudalism where we're completely abandoned totally, chances are good that the only time that you'll actually interact with the state is through a police force, because it's the only thing that'll be left, right? That they're going to extract everything else, and the only thing they'll willingly fund is a police force. And so your best strategy, and everyone's best survival strategy moving forward is going to be get to know your neighbors really well, talk to your neighbors, have a big conversation with your neighbors, right? Get to know them, create strategies, create ideas, create thoughts with your neighbors, and plant gardens. Plant gardens all over the place. Like if you see a patch of grass, rip it up, plant a garden. Like that's the only strategy that is left to us, because the system is, I think it's already started, Baldy McNose hair, right? Like that the framework of it is already in place. That they're just gonna wait until, like when the switch gets pulled, right? When there's like what the billionaire class calls this is the event, right? There's a very I forget the name of it offhand. I literally read an article that contained this just yesterday, and it reminded me of it. There's this economist who went and talked to a room full of billionaires about this, and they were very clear that they weren't interested in preventing these disasters. They just wanted to find out how they could best manipulate their own situation in like bunkers and shit. Right? Like we're dealing with like a psychopath class that's obviously become completely unhinged, and it's not going to have a come to Jesus moment and figure itself out. It's just not, right? It's just simply not. And the ball is already in motion. Like it's already happening. And I think that the Liberal Party basically exists as a smokescreen, and the Conservative Party exists in order to just throw cops at you. And those are the only strategies that they'll ever have, and they'll actually have left. Right. So I think it's about getting to know your neighbors, getting to know their names, getting to know what they do, what their job is. Right. And start talking to them about like, hey, I'd like to plant a garden. Right. Like, are you interested in this sort of stuff? I'm going to plant a garden. And I think planting gardens is going to be very, very, very important moving forward. Like we're not. And I think we got to get ourselves into a position where we're not asking permission. Right, because they're not going to like. I think that the way it's going to go, Baldy, is that it's happening right now slowly because they're just putting pieces in place, right? And that climate change and the situation that's happening in the world right? It's like this slow cooker thing that's going on right now, but like it's like a pot of water, right? That the pot of water isn't boiling until it's boiling. And when it boils, right? So it's like boom, and it kicks off. Another way I've heard this described is by like the canoe tipping theory. Like right now, where like somebody is standing in a canoe and they're rocking the canoe back and forth, and everybody else in the canoe is like, "Stop it! That's a problem! Stop it! That's a problem!" And the guy who's tipping the canoe is like, "What are you talking about? Everything's fine. What are you talking about? Everything's fine. There's no water in the canoe. There's no water in the canoe." But so when the canoe finally tips and water comes into the canoe, does it come in slowly or does it come in very quickly? Right? So we are in the there's a problem phase, right? And we're seeing the problems in there directly in front of us. And I think the thing that is most indicative of what's going on in the world today, and the most indicative thing of what's happening, is that our ruling class is not responding to the crises. That I think is the big red flashing red alert, right? That it's one thing to face crises, right? I think every culture faces crises, right? We're humans in a very complex system that we don't have control over, right? It's normal to face crises. I think so that's fine. I think the flashing red alarm is that our ruling class has not been responding to those crises and will not respond to those crises rationally. And you can go all the way back to like the 70s, right? Like the fossil fuel industry knew about climate change as early as the 70s and chose to launch massive disinformation campaigns. And those people are not in jail. Right? That's the most irrational shit I've ever seen in my life, right? And it shows you very cleanly and clearly that we're not irrational people. And we're not interested in being irrational people. And we're not going to encounter the consequences of these issues rationally. We're not going to have rational decision making. It's going to be very, very, very hysterical, hyper people. Hold on, guys, 1 second. I think my dog just fucking peed. Hold on. Milo, did you just pee? You did. Dude, you suck. Dude. I took you down, man. Why did you do that? Dude, why did you do that? Why did you do that just then? Why did you do that just then? Come with me. Come on, let's go. Come here. Come here. In you go. Come on. No, you don't just get away with that. In you go. Sit. No. What makes you think that you can do that? No. Dude, I took Milo down. I took Milo down 10 minutes before this show. I took Milo down 10 minutes before we did this show so that he could have a pee. Then he pees 30 minutes into the show. Unacceptable behavior. Unacceptable behavior. Content, good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. The captain. Can't gaslighting also having people question their knowledge even if they have an objective point? Yeah. No, it's about convincing the other person that they're insane. That's what it's about. Oh, Baldy McNosehair, thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate that. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. Did you see that the EU has openly declared that they are preparing for realistic warfare with Russia? Yeah, it's on their page even. Yeah. Like, I just think that I think they've lost their mind. Right? Like it's mask off fascism now. Right? Like, we don't need to pretend. Like, we don't need to talk about this like it's like they're on the path to fascism. Like, that's done. They're fascists. Right? Like, they're fascists. It's very obvious that they're fascists. They're not responding rationally to what's going on in the world. They're living in a state of hysteria, right? And like everything is going to be like this, where the West is essentially living in a state of total hysteria, where everything is just completely emotionally driven, and we have the emotional maturity of a like 4-year-old. Like we're not emotionally mature at all, and so we are having, we're just having like what we're doing is very irrational, like very, very irrational. And when the crises start to really kick off and when it really, really matters, and you can take a look at the truth of this statement through how we acted through COVID, right? Do you think that we acted rationally through COVID or not? Like, do you think that was a rational response? Do you think we were rational through that period of time? Or do you think that we were all just running around hysterically, just responding to emotional impulses? Because I think that we were responding to emotional impulses. I don't think that there was any rationale happening whatsoever, right? And then if you actually sat down and looked at any of these situations through the rational lens, it's like there's so many situations where it's like that this is crazy. I mean, this is crazy the way that we were acting. And I think a big part of that is that the system of capital benefits from it. It benefits from the hysteria. Right? Like if you've got situations and if you've got a system that makes money through crises and discovers a way to extract wealth for itself through the manipulation of crises, well then don't be surprised at all when it starts generating crises. Right? And it's not going to act rationally in the midst of crises. It's just not. Right? So like I think we really do have to just start accepting that that's the truth. We have to actually genuinely stop pretending as though our electoral systems are going to act rationally. And we just have to start doing things in the world. Like we just have to start doing what activists would call direct action, right? Which is just doing stuff, right? Like plant that garden, don't ask permission, right? Make them come and rip it up. Like make them spend resources to come and do it. Like don't ask them for it. Don't ask for a passage of a law or something, right? Like just do these things, and then let them spend the resources and let them stand in front of you and actually attempt to justify why they're destroying a garden, because they can't, right? We're dealing with a fascist society that's gone full blown mask off fascist at this point. You can see, and I mean you see that in Europe. Europe is just full-blown mask off now. For God's sakes, America is outright committing a genocide directly in front of our eyes. They're just mask off, right? So and it's not going to get better. It's just not going to get better. Kaz, I've been here before. I've been driving, couldn't say anything. I've commented like once before. Spread the word. Thank you, Kaz. I appreciate it. Yeah, and so to kind of finish that thought, like when do I think it's going to start? I think it's already started. I think it's already in front of us. I think we're already looking at it. I don't think we are going to prevent it, because I think that the people in the society are largely fascist. I think you have like outright fascists who seem to think they're not fascists, but who are obviously fascists. And then you have like their allies, which are liberals, who are like one step away. Like a liberal is just like a fascist who's just like one meal away from being a fascist. That's really the truth. Like get a liberal and make it so that they don't eat for one day, and suddenly they'll become like the most hard-nosed fascist person you've ever seen in your life. And our entire system is geared towards self-destruction and self-immolation. And then most importantly, anybody who tries to stand up and actually move the society away from that self-immolation, there are systems to funnel them out of positions of power to actually have an impact, right? So the entire structure of the entire society and the entire system, as well as huge sections of the populace, is largely fascist. and is going to respond in a fascist way. Like, they're not going to respond in a rational way. Is there like explicitly like a Nazi party that's taking over? No, but I don't think that Nazism is different from fascism. And if you ask me, neoliberalism is fascism. I'm listening to an audiobook right now called The Capital Order. And as I'm listening to The Capital Order and the way that she's just going through the rise of fascism, the rise of austerity, the rise of fascist economics and all this, I'm like, this is neoliberalism. Like, and it's neoliberalism. That the only thing that the neoliberals, like the neoliberalism reformed fascism by saying, oh, we can actually include diversity into this. We can create language of diversity. So diversity and inclusivity into fascist economics. So instead of it going down the Nazi line, where we commit austerity and privatize everything and destroy the social fabric of the system, and then maintain order through the destruction of that social system with extreme acts of violence against the poor, instead of taking that down a line of ethnic violence, instead of saying white people are the superior race and we need to eradicate X, Y, and Z group or whatever, instead you say, oh no, X, Y, and Z group is completely permitted to be part of the power structure and part of the system of fascism in order to destroy the poor people through violence and force, to privatize the system and commit austerity against them and enslave them, right? So so that's what neoliberalism learned from the period of fascism, and that's what neoliberalism has attempted to do. And I think ultimately it's going to fail. That and you see this through figures like Ben Shapiro, like Jordan Peterson, through the Republican Party most dramatically, and it exists within the Conservative Party here in Canada for sure, which is the assault against diversity, inclusion, and equity, what they call DIE, right? And wokeism, right? The whole wokeism movement, right? So essentially what we've ended up with here in the West is two groups of fascists debating whether or not black people should be involved in the system. That's basically where we're at right now. And so once the crisis begins and really starts to ramp up, and once crises start to get really serious, it'll be class war in either case. That the battle line will be drawn based on where you stand in the economy, right? It won't be. It might be along racial lines. It might have that tenor to it, and it'll certainly unleash those forces, if not officially through government. But if you're poor, you're dead, right? If you're poor, you're totally fucked. Like, the government's not going to come and save you, right? It's just not happening. XD writes, people who join the police force are dark-hearted by nature. They also need to relinquish their savage native culture and be civilized, adopt Western values like freedom. Yeah, that's part of the neoliberal thing. It's just a reform of fascism, right? And it's a reform that I don't think is going to survive. Eric writes, friends of mine have repeatedly said to me, why do I care so much about politics since this stuff doesn't directly impact you? It totally directly impacts us. It completely directly impacts us. That's so, like, what a win for the system of power. What a system of power win, right? To be able to say, like, yes, politics doesn't affect you at all. Pay no attention to the system of politics. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Where people don't care about the economy directly impacts them without understanding systemic issues. Yeah, exactly. That guy, good to see you. I think that people are, like, systems can be so big that you don't see them, right? Like, a system can be so big that you don't really understand it anymore, and you don't really think about the system, and you don't really think about things. Like, something as simple as the education system, which we all went through, right? People don't actually think about that as a system. People don't actually think about, like, they just sort of assume that exists. And they don't ask themselves how this exists, why this exists, who set this up, Why is this here? What was its goals? What's its initiatives? Why is it doing these sorts of things? Right? None of that. Right? It's just no. It's just, of course, it's a normal thing that everybody has. Right? Like, no, no. And if you never actually pause to think, or if you're never given the chance to pause and think about this stuff, then you just kind of go through your life blithely believing that, yeah, politics doesn't have an impact on me. And I would sit here being like, yeah, politics definitely has an impact on you. Politics for sure has an impact on you. Okay, guys, I gotta go get my dog. 1 second. I don't know why you did that, dude. You haven't done that in like years and years. Why did you do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense, my man. And I like gave you a ton of treats, and I gave you like a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't know, we were having a good day, and you decided to pee on my clothes. It didn't make any sense. Dogs. Dogs. They're inscrutable. The captain writes, you know what issue I have with liberals who are fighting for democracy? They're actually not thinking democratic at all. One thing people need to consider is that certain cultures are tied to deep traditions that should be allowed to exist, but there has been such toxicity towards this. While the US, on the other hand, is a fairly young country when compared to China and Russia, but who are the West to tell these people how to be? If these countries want to change, the only way to peacefully resolve is from within. Change from within. Otherwise, it'll just feed into propaganda. Am I daft for thinking this way? Of course not. No. And it's so charming that we call ourselves democratic when, like, we're essentially just a bunch of top-down dictatorships with a system of electoralism that only responds to those top-down dictatorships, right? Like, that's what it is. So to call this system democratic, I think, is very charming. Like, whereas other systems, right, you have democratic systems within the workplace. So, for example, China has built into its constitution, it says if you have a workplace, you need to have a workers' council, right? And that workers' council is essentially a union that exists by the law and by constitution within every workplace, right? That's much more democratic, much more democratic than anything we've got here. Right, where you have this very antagonistic relationship between unions and workplaces. Like Amazon is literally fighting tooth and nail to make it so that Amazon employees can't even unionize in the first place. Meanwhile, China is like, no, Amazon's here. Here's Amazon. Here's your workers' council. Oh, you don't want a workers' council? Well, then you can't be here. Right? We have a constitution. Too bad. So which one of those two is more democratic? Which one of those two is actually interested in listening to the people? Which one of those two is actually responding to the nature of the people? Like I see this all the time. I've seen this throughout my entire career, right? Every single institution that I've ever had a job at, the people at the top of the chain never listened to the workers. And what's so stupid, I saw it when I was a kid and I see it today, right? It is to the detriment of the ownership class. They lose money, they lose resources, they lose people, they lose clients, they lose customers, right? It happens all the time, constantly, and I watch it happen because they don't listen. They don't listen to their workers because they're arrogant, they're patriarchal, they're condescending, they're psychopaths a lot of the time. Right? Like, and I don't think I've ever seen any institution. I don't think I've ever been part of any institution where once you get outside of direct store management, right? Like, I would actually say that most of the store managers that I have worked with in my career have been decent people just trying to do a good job and keep the ship running. And then you start talking to district managers and regional managers, And I think in my entire career, I have seen maybe one district manager who wasn't a complete nut job, right? Like that once you get above store management level, you disconnect from reality and you just become a total nut job. And your job is to just respond to the owners and come in and tell people who've been doing the job the whole time how to run their store. And you always lose money. Every single time. I've never seen a district manager come in and act that way and have the store make money for it. It's always a loss. Every single time. So it's just crazy to me. The new sunshine list. What's the sunshine list? What's the sunshine list? I don't even know what that is. Yeah, workers know the best way to do their job and improve efficiency. Well, and it's workers that should actually talk about, like, they're the ones that are living in it. They're the ones that have to deal with it. So like when upper management comes in and messes with what the workers are doing, you always lose money every time. It's never better. Oh yeah, the 100K government salary. Yeah, okay. Central bank digital currency plans are in full swing. Plans are to implement digital currency in certain countries within 2 years. Oh yeah, they're going to digitize the whole currency. That'll last for a couple of minutes. The whole thing will come down for one reason or another. I think the digitization of currencies really shows you how fascist these guys are. There's only one good reason to digitize your currency, and that's to have a full-blown surveillance state. There's no other reason to have a digital currency. It doesn't make sense in any other way. Like, the idea that you're going to burn fossil fuels so that you can have digital funny money, right, is the dumbest shit of my life. Like, it's the only reason you want to have it is so that you can enact a full-blown surveillance state. Which, incidentally, that's what they're doing. Right? That's what they're doing. Germany to include questions about Israel in citizenship test, says minister. So if you're not a pro-genocide psychopath, then you don't get to go to Germany. Real straightforward. So much for free speech. As if that ever existed. Yeah, sunshine lists for the public sector. Yeah, I don't know how much I care about that. Like, oh, a couple of people or a handful of people in the public sector are making $100,000. Like, it's such a conservative, like, boogeyman sort of thing to do. To be like, oh, these government workers are siphoning away money from the taxpayers. These guys are making over $100,000 for just being an administrator and just doing the kind of thing. All kind of. Meanwhile, like, their bosses are stealing their wages every day. Right, their bosses are just siphoning wealth away from them at an accelerated pace, at like a neck-breaking speed, and they're just complaining about some guy who's like making a little bit more than they think he should, right? Like if that same person was making like $80,000, they probably wouldn't be bitching so loud because it's $100. Such a big number. They shouldn't be making that amount of money. They should be making $50,000 like I'm making. That's what they should be doing. Yeah, it's just the working class fighting itself for the benefit of the capitalist class. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Roger's server went down last year. People's debit and credit cards wouldn't work anymore. Yep. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think that the digitization of currencies is a very stupid idea. Right? Like, I just think it's a very stupid idea. Like it's an evil idea. I think that's definitely true. But I think it's also just very stupid. Like, I just don't think it's going to work. Like it might work for 30 seconds. Like, it might work for like a little flash in the pan. You might get a couple of years out of it. You might get something like that. But it's just such a fragile thing to do. Like, I just don't think it's actually going to function the way that people want it to function. Yeah, all those mergers make it easier to nationalize. Yeah. The president of Metrolinx is making a $1 million. Yeah, it's put out by unions to hold them accountable. I mean, it's just clown shoes. The captain writes, it's also funny how people are memeing on BRICS for being useless. Okay. While sure, some of the states have problems in their policies, yeah, such as corruption, sure, in the long-term trajectory of resourcefulness, wealth, and production, BRICS are moving ahead of the G7, especially since the BRICS Plus expansion, which will continue. And while we're on Germany, their industry is hamstrung right now. Yeah, of course. Like what's the history, guys? Like, what's the history? Right? What's Germany's feedback loop? Right? So, World War One, right? World War One happens. It literally catches Europe by surprise. Okay. Nobody expects World War One to be this industrialized, crazy war that happened, but it happened, and Germany ends up being on the losing side of that politically, and so has to pay an economic cost. They are humiliated. They're not happy about it. They go into an economic downspin, which leads to rising communism. Right, Germany at one point, along with Italy, is the center of communism, which of course leads to the upswell of fascism. Okay, modern day. What happened very recently? Right, you had a war between Moscow and Ukraine. This whole proxy war that was basically NATO versus Russia through this proxy war, which NATO lost. And Germany is actually paying a pretty heavy cost for that, right? They're being, Skadefron, how are you, friend? How are you? Good to see you. We've got a raid coming in from Skadefron. And so at the end of this war, right, the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline, right, you're ending up with a humiliated Germany that has lost economic prestige, which seems to be opening them up to humiliation and economic woes, leading to a second conflict, right? That the first conflict was between the European powers, and the second conflict was also between the European powers, and then worked itself over into Russia, right? How you guys all doing today? Wow. 39 people on the Twitch. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy, man. Skatefron, whatever you're doing over there, man, it's working. It's working for you. I'm impressed that you've got 39 people. I wanted to say, Skatefron, I have never once come and seen your content, even though you've been raiding me for a while now, and I'd like to apologize for that. I'm just a dummy. That's all it is. I'm just a dummy. So I'm gonna pop over one of these days. So here's a video that I really want to show, just to show you guys how insane we've gotten, right? I've noticed you're not here too often, so I understand. I tend to stream. I stream 3 hours Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because that's all I've got, right? It's all I've got. I can't do any more than that. I need to sleep and take a break at some point. So one of these days I'll slip into your thing. When do you stream, Skatefron? Like, what's your schedule, so that I could know, so that I could actually seek you out, the diamond in the rough. Yeah, no, of course, Germany is a U.S. satellite, right? NATO is a U.S. satellite. Like the NATO exists as a U.S. entity, really. 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. every day. Good to know, bud. Good to know. So, and I'm gonna play this video. Let me get my sound sorted here so you guys can actually hear it. Here we go.
Talk to members of Congress about Israel and the U.S.'s relationship.
All right, go.
There are some biblical prophecies that say that control of Jerusalem by the Jews is important for the second coming of Christ.
This entire matter is based upon faith of our Maker, of our Creator. but it's also faith of a chosen people.
Can you ask why the Democrats using our law enforcement screens?
How would you like to see the Capitol Police?
There's a new government in Israel. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of the U.S. relationship with Israel?
There have been two nations created to glorify God, Israel and the United States of America. I will bless both. I will honor both. I will do all I can to stand and defend them.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Take care. I'm a reporter from The Intercept. I want to ask you about the hearing. Do you have a quick second?
Sure, man.
Do you think there's a role of religious extremism here in the U.S. funding and shaping the conflict? I mean, there are a lot of folks who are part of the evangelical movement that want
Support Israel.
support
Yeah,
Israel, and we don't really kind of see that same kind of constituent group pushing the other way.
Yeah, I wouldn't label the Baptist or the evangelical community as extreme because I feel like they're following the Scripture and what the Scripture says about Israel. Those who bless Israel will be blessed. I mean, they take it literal, and I'm one of those people.
You know, there's some Christian Zionists that do believe in some of these biblical prophecies, and they're very controversial even within the Christian Zionist evangelical
What the
community.
interpretation is.
Yeah, and believing in Armageddon, that there will be a final battle around Jerusalem, and that after that battle, there's a judgment day. Jews will be killed or converted. Jesus will come back. There's going to be a rapture event. What do you think about those kind of prophecies?
I believe Jesus will come back, and I'm going to be on his side.
I believe that Jesus will come back. I think Jesus Christ is coming back at any single moment. Jesus Christ is speaking to me now, and he's telling me at this moment that you need to reach into your wallet and send $1 to the address down below. Like, these people are nuts, right? Like we've lost our minds, right? Like, it's bad enough that these little cults existed, right? It's bad enough that they existed kind of in little pockets across, but now they've taken power. And you've got people like straight up. This guy straight up said, "I believe that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment." Like, I believe that the rapture will be, yeah. And so it's going to create like a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's exactly right. Like, oh, it says here in this book that Jesus Christ will come back when the world is in war and disaster and deserts are everywhere and it's plagues all over the place and everything. So that's a good thing because it means Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment. Like, these guys suck, right? These guys suck, and it's so just fucking like the brain rot is real. The brain rot is fucking real. Like, your books have magic in it. Like, your books have magic in it. You've got Jesus Christ was walking around being like water, wine, bing, bing, biddy, bobbity, walking on water, right? Literally like manifesting fish, raising the dead. He himself is killed and then 3 days later rises. Like, your book has magic in it. It would be as though there's, like, I'd love to make this movie. I'd love to make this movie where we all lived in a world where everybody thought that Harry Potter was real. That the Harry Potter movies were supposed to be literal, and you were supposed to literally believe that there were literally wizards, literally hiding, literally behind everything, literally. And that we were all just and whenever anything happened, it was like, oh, the wizards did it. Oh, the wizards did it. And oh, don't you worry when the evil Dark Lord comes, he who cannot be named. When he comes, the great Harry Potter will show up and fight the Dark Lord, the chosen one. Like, this is what it's gonna be. This is what it is. And these are the people who have control of the nukes. These are the people who have control of the global economy. These are the people who actually are running the show. Dude, I'm going to tell you what, Conton. Here's the thing, right? What if, okay, hear me out, all right? What if all the apocalypse shit does start to happen and then Jesus Christ does come back? Huh? What then? I actually think like if they started showing footage of like Jesus Christ descending from heaven and like all that kind of stuff, I would immediately be like, CIA. That's the CIA, dude, for sure. That's a CIA psyop, right? Absolutely. All the CIA being there like, oh man, the world's going to hell and losing its mind. How do we take control over any of this? I know what we'll do. We'll have Jesus Christ come back. And then everybody will be like, oh, it's Jesus. And then Jesus, who is our CIA operative, will be like, do this. And they'll be like, yes, Jesus, whatever you say. And of course, he's a CIA op, so he's a psyop. So Jesus will be like, verily I say unto thee, don't come to America. Stay in your own country. Those who survive the climate change apocalypse are good, actually. They're the holy chosen people. Yes, you were the chosen people to survive the climate apocalypse. Certainly not just the fact that you have all the money and the wealth and the power, right? Like, you guys are obviously like psychopaths, right? Just crazed lunatics. Project Bluebeam explicitly suggests using such a scenario or using aliens. Bro. Project Bluebeam. Let's go. Let's go. Serge Monist. He is known to English-speaking readers mainly for originating the conspiracy theory Project Bluebeam. Okay, this isn't like a real thing. No, this is just like a conspiracy thing. In 1994, he published Project Bluebeam, in which he detailed his claim that NASA, with the help of the United Nations, was attempting to implement a New Age religion with the Antichrist at its head to start a new world order via a technologically simulated second coming of Christ, citation needed. He also gave talks on his topic, better source needed. Cartoonist Christopher Knowles noted the similarity of Project Bluebeam to the plots of Gene Roddenberry's unproduced 1975 Star Trek screenplay, The God Thing, and 1991 Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Devil's Due. Okay, I was expecting something a bit more significant, a bit more serious. Low observable goat. You want a Christianity hot take? It started as a Roman equivalent to COINTELPRO, focused on Jewish societies, and then became a useful general social engineering tool for the state. No. That's absolutely correct. That's exactly what Christianity was. Well, I actually have like kind of a deeper take on Christianity as a cultural force, because I think that what Christianity actually begins with is as a grassroots movement that is fighting against the most brutal empire that has existed on the planet. Like, these guys were performing like ritualistic crucifixions, right? Like, imagine living in a society with public executions, right? And not just public executions, but public crucifixions. Like, that is a brutal terrorist police state. Like, there's no other way to describe it. And moreover, you're living in this brutal, repressive psychopath empire that does public execution, public torture, and public crucifixions. And every single uprising, the most significant one being the third one with Spartacus. We all remember Spartacus, right? Spartacus, 10,000 men were crucified after that uprising. That they were crucified from the port, I think it was called the Agrippa Way. So if you were a slave coming in from the northern colonies, from the Gauls and all of this kind of stuff, if you were a newly captured slave coming into Rome, right, you would walk down this pathway and there would be these 10,000 row of crosses that they had there, where they had crucified 10,000 men. and you would hear the story of Spartacus without a doubt. And I actually think that it's the story of Spartacus that inspires the story of Jesus Christ. That's the originator. That's the original, like that's the reality-based story. And when you are in a society where violence can no longer work, right? Because if you have a civil uprising, a violent uprising, then you need to begin narrative control and you need to begin telling stories. And the story of Christ shows up as one of these narrative devices in order to change hearts and minds and tell people that we can live in a society without this torture and we can live in a society without this brutality. And that's why Christ is like this amalgamation of many different figures and many different gods and many different stories, right? He's got connections to Ra, he's got connections to Dionysus, right? He's got connections to all different types. In order to take different cultural groups and create a single icon for all of them to fall under an umbrella. And Christianity wasn't the only one doing this. There were other people doing this, but Christianity became the one that got co-opted by the state. And finally started to get used by the state, and it became the state religion, and it changed and amalgamated. But the one success that Christianity had, and you can't take it away from Christianity. You can't. Christianity was the cited reason. Jesus Christ was the cited reason why the act of crucifixion was banned as a practice in the Western world, and it's never come back. Even when the CIA was torturing people in the Bush administration, they were not crucifying people. Crucifixion as an act has never returned. And I know that's a low fucking bar, but we're a barbaric people. We're a barbarian people, and it takes us a long time to learn basic things like don't crucify people. Baby steps. So you can't take it away from Christianity. Hey, June, how you doing? Hey, June. We're going to turn Earth into Venus. We won't have that magical holy moment. Bro, what if there were some crucifixions in Abu Ghraib, I don't know about them. So I'll take that source. Yeah, it sounds like the dying and regenerating God concept was ubiquitous around that era. Oh, sure. There were a bunch of gods that had that. I actually make the argument that, like, if you look at Jesus Christ as a figure, like, the reason why that's the case, right? The reason why the dying and resurrecting God is a common theme is that it's a coded message, and it basically boils down to you can kill the messenger, but you cannot kill the message. That's what it means. That Jesus Christ was a message, Dionysus was a message, Ra was a message, right? That they came and with ideas and thoughts that were counter to the popular culture and certainly the ruling class culture of the day. They were outspoken against the prevailing power forces, and the ultimate message is you can kill that person, but the idea will be resurrected. And the idea that Jesus Christ had in the Western world is give everybody food and shelter. Just make sure everybody has food and shelter, right? It's such a brain-dead, obvious thing that we should 100% be doing from every perspective except does it benefit a psychopath, that it's sort of wild that it even needs to be said out loud, that we've gotten so degenerate and so pathetic as a people that we're not even trying to feed our own people. Joseph Stalin, I'm going to let you know, if you put links in the Twitch chat, I have literally no reason to, no way to show them on the stream. Like, just ask me to Google stuff. Like, if you're going to, yeah, USSR made Russia great. For sure it did. Like, absolutely it did. Like, this is why I'm saying these days, make gardens. Plant gardens. If you're sitting there confused and you don't know what to do and you don't know what to achieve or what to pursue, and you're feeling helpless and you're not sure where to be, and you feel in stasis or any of that, plant a garden. Plant a garden. Right? And if you go ahead and you plant a garden, that by itself at this stage in the game is a revolutionary act. because you're building parallel systems in a fundamental way. In a fundamental way. You should meet the Twitch streamer, Silveril. We should all start doing like a group stream. That's what we really should do. We should come together and start doing like group streams and things like this. I'm seeing like liberals doing that more and more. Well, I shouldn't say liberals, but like progressive types, right? Who still kind of believe that there are electoral solutions, right? Like I don't think there's electoral solutions anymore. I think that's over, right? I called that I've been calling that a long time ago. I don't think there's an electoral solution anymore. I think that if people were to start showing up and actually start influencing the system in order to move against the people who actually have power, they would just be assassinated. Like that's where I think we're at this stage. I don't think that we are in a I don't think we're going to actually change the way the system works or anything. Like it's a non-responsive system that's designed to be a non-responsive system. It's basically just a way for rich people to negotiate plunder with themselves. That's really the only reason the electoral system actually exists in the first place. It was kind of set up to be that way in the first place. Like it was never there to give concessions to the people. Like that's a joke. Like what are you talking about? It was literally set up by slavers. Like they didn't set it up so that the slaves could have rights. Right? They didn't set it up for that reason. They set it up so that they could negotiate terms with each other. Right? Like everybody makes a lot of hay about the Second Amendment, and they pound the pulpit about how like the Second Amendment exists so that I can have a gun. It's like, no, it doesn't. That's not the reason why the Second Amendment exists. The Second Amendment exists so that each one of these guys, Jefferson, Washington, right, Benjamin Franklin, all these guys, could say to one another, it's enshrined in our Constitution that each one of us gets to have an organized militia, and that's okay. It's totally fine that each one of us gets to have a funded militia. So I, Benjamin Franklin, and I, George Washington, can have my own personal militia so that I can protect myself militarily from you fucks. Like that's what it was, right? It wasn't so that like Jim Beam of Nebraska can I get to have a rifle and an AR-57 and a nuclear bomb fueled tank because the Second Amendment says so. Like that's just not what it was. It's just like not what it was. It's so fucking embarrassing. Yeah, electoral systems are a joke. Surround the halls of power, general strikes, blockades, emergency act be damned. Like, I mean, I think there's just going to come a point when the disaster is going to be so directly in front of us, and the system of power is going to be so incapable of responding to it, and so unwilling. That's the look. I've said this over and over and over again on my stream, and I'll continue saying it over and over and over again. That if we were facing these crises, if we were facing these problems, and the systems that we had were actually even trying to respond to them, but failing, I think that I would feel a lot better. I'd be sitting here being like, hey, these guys are trying. We can have a real negotiation about it. Like we can have a talk about it. But what are we talking about? We're talking about dumbass woke, like we're talking about carbon taxes and axe the tax. Like this is literally what is happening in Canada today. That the thing that's happening is everybody's having a big hoopla debate over a very small, insignificant tax that was put on carbon that really only impacts the top 20% of the society at all in terms of financial loss at all. And this is what we're discussing. Like, it's embarrassing. Like, it's embarrassing. Any rational society anywhere would well, first of all, like the whole conversation is couched completely in climate change denialism, right? Like, sure, axe the tax. What's your solution then? What's your solution for climate change? What's your plan? Oh, you don't have one. Why? Because you don't think it exists, right? So we're just a very embarrassing people who are not responding rationally to the major crises that are happening. And the reason why we're not responding rationally to the major crises is because the electoral system really only responds to the wealthy. And a pretty huge section of the populace is already full-blown fascist. That when crises begin, it'll get really obvious. Meta is now flagging pro-Palestine posts, and the FBI is showing up at people's homes. That's fun. Like, that's fun. Here we go. Right? Here's the decline. Get to know your neighbors. Plant your gardens. John, didn't I go to Doug Ford's house? I did go to Doug Ford's house on 2 occasions. I organized one failed protest and one successful protest. That we went to Doug Ford's house, and the police showed up, and we were there to shout at Doug Ford about disability and the disability system that was there. And it's okay. Hold on. Yeah, no, the USSR didn't collapse, right? Like they kind of gave up the ghost internally. The Revolution Report. revolutionreport.org. Fight censorship. Seek truth. Fight censorship. Seek truth. You got it. Anything in here that's things that have been discredited. The destruction of Yugoslavia, yeah. Venezuela, yeah, good. Analysis, global conflicts, theory. Oh yeah, if you've got Stalin, the history and critique of a black legend, you're already well ahead of the game. Just like any literature that surrounds, like, Westerners are so funny when it comes to their analysis of the Soviet Union, because basically all they do is they just listen to Trotsky. Right? They only read Trotsky, and so they listen to the loser of the conflict, and they just take what Trotsky has to say at face value, and they just go, that Trotsky said it, that's the truth, that's what it is. It's like, there's probably more to it than that, dude. Like, when I'm looking at a historical moment, or when I'm looking at a historical character, right, I'm probably interested in hearing what the winners had to say. Right? Probably interested in hearing what the people who actually took power actually had to say. Right? It's not like Stalin didn't write anything. Right? It's not like he didn't contribute at all. Right? He actually said stuff. And it's I mean, the reason why Westerners do it is because Trotsky supports their anti-Soviet. He became very virulently anti-Soviet because, I mean, he was so put out. He was so put out that he had lost. Right? Which, in my opinion, is kind of like, what happens if Trotsky actually stays and actually gets reintegrated back into the system of, into the Soviet system? Trotsky's obviously brilliant. He's obviously a brilliant man, but just bro, you lost. He lost, right? He lost that election, right? Stalin won. And it doesn't matter if you call it a bureaucratic dictatorship or whatever. It's that's the fun. That is actually the moment that I immediately was like, what? To these Trotskyists, the people who are really up Trotsky's asshole, right? The moment I really started to be like, that sounds wrong. It's like, wait, how did Stalin take power? And they say, because Trotsky said, He took power through a bureaucratic dictatorship. And I was like, oh, a bureaucratic dictatorship. What does that look like? And when you start to pull that thread, do you know what it looks like? It means that they held an election and Stalin convinced more people to vote for him than the other guy. That's the bureaucratic dictatorship. I don't know how I don't know how I can take that seriously, right? I don't know how I can take that seriously. I will say this about Trotskyists. I will absolutely say this about Trotskyists. When there is a crisis, when there is a protest, when there's something happening, they show up. And I consider that to be very valuable. To me, that supersedes and goes beyond theoretical debating about historical figures, right? I don't actually care that much about what your opinion is about Trotsky or Stalin. When shit's hitting the fan, are you there? Did you come? Right? That matters a lot to me. And that's what I really, really respect. I really respect. And here in Toronto, anyway, that's how it is. The Trotskyists are the ones that show up. Almost every single time there's a labor action movement, almost every single time there's something going on, there's Trotskyists. So I don't know why that's the case, but that is how it is. And I've got to respect it. Ooh, here's an article I'm going to read. But we've got Jaden207 _ farm boy. Jaden, welcome aboard. I think this is your first comment. State capitalism is not real capitalism. Just like social democracy is not socialism. Therefore, in order to experience real capitalism, we need stateless capitalism. There's no such thing as stateless capitalism. That's just kind of a joke. Capitalism requires the state to survive. Like there's no such thing as stateless capitalism. That if you had a stateless capitalism, the very first thing that would happen would be that capitalism would collapse, and there would be no reinforcing mechanism, and so it would cease to exist. The underclass and the working class would overthrow the system of capital almost immediately. Like almost immediately, it would just like get overthrown, and the system of capital as a system, as an existent force in the world, would stop existing. That capitalism began through state violence. It perpetuates itself through state violence. And the only thing that maintains it is state violence. That if it wasn't for armed men with guns upholding laws, threats, said by the landholders and the factory owners, the asset holders, right, the ownership class, if it wasn't for those men with guns, the system of capital would cease to exist, and it would happen very quickly. It would happen almost immediately. Without state capitalism, we wouldn't have a state controlling and regulating the market. Everybody would be able to invest open business as easily, and the system would flow very nicely. I just don't think there's any evidence for it, and it's not a serious analysis of capitalism. Like it just sounds like nonsense. Like it doesn't. It's an unserious analysis of the system of capital. That what capitalism is a two-class system, primarily a two-class system, where you have an ownership class, what's historically called the bourgeoisie, and a working class, which is historically called the proletariat, that are divided between property ownership. That the bourgeoisie, the owners, own things. They own the means of production. They own land. They own the ability to produce food. They own housing to be able to rent out, right? They own things. Whereas the workers, by definition, own nothing except their own labor, right? Themselves, which they sell themselves through a process of wage slavery to the capitalist class, the ownership class, in order to get access to food and shelter, right? And all of that I just described is upheld and maintained through the existence of a state. And that state is armed guards. There's endless possibilities to grow under capitalism. I mean, capitalism has its natural barriers, and those natural barriers are the resources that we have access to. Even online, one can dig in and make a living. We just need to introduce new people to opportunities so we can enrich as a whole and stateless. I just don't think you understand what you're saying. Like, I just don't think you know what the state actually is. And I don't think you actually understand how the system of capital actually operates. Like, I think that you sound like somebody who's saying, like, what you've said here, Jaden, is not different than somebody saying, all you gotta do is believe in your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And if you believe in Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and one day he's gonna come down from the heavens and bestow upon all the believers golden crowns, and we'll live here in a new heaven built on earth forever and ever. Praise Jesus Christ. It's the same. It's the same. The state is a barrier to freedom and capitalism. Capitalism exists because of the state. Capitalism requires the state. You can't have capitalism without a state. If you were to suddenly abolish the state, the first thing that would happen is that capitalism would go with it. Because of what capitalism is, and because of what the state is, and how they interact, and how they operate in the world. And that's just like fundamentally the truth. That you're living in a religious ideology that has no basis in reality. Like, very, very upfrontly, very frankly. Like, the state is armed guards, right? Military, police. That's what the state is, right? And whether that's through, like, investigators, or whether that's the CIA, your intelligence side of things, or all that kind of stuff, they're all the same. It's the same idea. Right? It's armed guards upholding the system as it exists, right? And then capitalism is the system by which there is a small group of people that own things and a large mass of people that do not. The state is here to tax, regulate the market, which creates bureaucracy to invest. In fact, the richest countries in the world have the most freedom, according to them. Like, according to them, of course. Like, of course the United States is going to say it's the freest country in the world, right? Like, of course Canada is going to say it's the freest country in the world. Like it's yeah, stateless capitalism sounds like ANCAP. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And I mean, for God's sakes, we have like a pretty clear example of this already happening in front of us. Like, this whole ANCAP idea. Like, the captain asks, what do you think of the UN if it was actually fair and without veto rights? Just fundamentally the Congress of nearly all countries coming together to address things. The UN is always going to be a toothless organization. It's never actually going to have a real, tangible, serious impact in global affairs. However, that said, okay? Like, that's the realist perspective. Like, there's no UN army, right? The UN can't pass legislation and have that legislation actually be seriously taken. Mikhail, good to see you. Joe, good to see you too. But what the UN does and why it is important is that it creates precedent, and it is a place where the nations of the world can come together and actually have serious discussions. And it's also a place where very serious people can illuminate a lot of things. There's a lot of illumination that happens through the UN. So I think that happens with or without the veto rights. But if there were no veto rights, like, any powerful actor can act how they want, right? The UN can't do anything, and the rest of the world is going to respond how they're going to respond. So I don't know that the whole veto conversation in the UN is as important as one thinks it is, because the UN as an organization isn't actually as consequential as you think it is. It's useful. It has its uses. It creates a lot of documents that let us pull out things and say, hey, like, for example, one of the most powerful documents regarding Venezuela came out of the UN Human Rights Commission, basically saying flatly that the Americans sanctioning Venezuela is what's causing all their problems. So all these guys being like, look at Venezuela, socialism doesn't work. Look at Venezuela, socialism doesn't work. Look at Venezuela. Literally, the UN came out and was like, you guys put sanctions on them. Like, are you stupid? The answer is obviously yes, but now we have proof. State doesn't create tax. Only private ownership. Like, Jaden, my man, Jaden, I need you to start falling more into questions and less into declarative statements. Like you got to get there, okay? Because it's pretty obvious that you don't know what you're talking about. Really obvious, bud. Like, really, really obvious. Like, you don't know what the terms you're saying mean. Right? Like, state doesn't create tax. Only private ownership. Right. Private ownership is indicative of the system of capital. Like, you need to have private ownership in the system of capital. Capitalism, it's like it runs in a system. It's a machine to make money and generate wealth. No, it isn't. Like, no, it's not. The system of capital is very explicitly a system by which a small group of people own the means of production, and the larger cohort, the workers, have to sell themselves to that group in order to secure food and shelter. Because the state doesn't generate nothing as a system, it doesn't create wealth, only poverty. Like, the system of capital is what's generating the poverty. In fact, the system of capital benefits from poverty creation. Right? That creating a section of the society that lives in poverty is useful for the capitalists to discipline the workforce. Right? You want to keep your workforce terrorized. You want them to be scared so that they will continue going to work for low wages. That's the whole point. That's the whole idea. You are hyper focusing on this concept of the state, and I don't think you know what it is. And I don't think you understand that the system of capital requires the state. It requires the state. That if the state were to suddenly vanish somehow, right, pretty much the next thing that would happen is that the system of capital would go. Because the ownership class would be confronted by the larger cohort of the working class, who would essentially overthrow the system of capital and seize the means of production for itself. Like, the only thing that keeps the system of capital actually going is the existence of these armed guards that prevent its overthrow. Like, and I just don't think you understand what the state actually is. And I don't think you understand the state's relationship to the system of capital, and I don't think you understand what the system of capital actually is. Like, I think that your analysis is very bad. Yeah, can't stand that trope. Socialism's been tried 40 times, never works, leaving out a bunch of things. Yeah, like the fact that it definitely works. Like, the fact that it definitely works. Like, that's my favorite thing, is that the system that socialist systems obviously have worked in the past. Like, they very obviously have worked in the past. But because they haven't generated the perfect utopia that capitalists imagine communists claim to be, then somehow it's a failure. Like, it's sort of wild. Low observable goat. The capitalist empire countries investigated themselves, and it turns out they are super freedom fountains. Yeah. Oh, just saw the footnote to the investigation. The freedom only applies to people who can afford it. And, and only if a bunch of poor people are working for them. I don't care about that, Quinn. No, I don't care. I think that these people need to be confronted in this way. Right? Get defensive. I don't give a shit. You understand? Like, there are flat earthers in the world. You understand? Like, I don't I don't give a shit. I don't care. Let these delusional losers confront somebody who knows something and get destroyed and get mad. I'm fine with that. I'm completely fine with that. Like, run off, go away, bye-bye. Goodbye, Flat Earther. Not interested in listening to your Looney Tunes shit anymore. Jaden writes, capitalism was a system that existed and came out of the womb without a state. No, that's completely false. That's just completely false, my man. You gotta, look, Jaden, you gotta stop making these declarative statements because you don't know anything. And it's very clear that you don't know anything. You gotta start asking questions. You gotta start looking around. You have manufactured a story that clearly doesn't exist. Like, clearly. Like, you're like 2 + 1 = 1. You just got everything all jumbled up and mixed up. And I don't know where you're getting it, but whoever's telling you this story, you got to get rid of it. You got to get rid of these people. You got to stop listening to those people. You got to stop listening to these kooky flat earther types that are filling your head with nonsense and telling you this story that's obviously false. Like, you gotta. Because if you don't, then you're just going to keep walking around in this haze of nonsense. Like, capitalism literally begins when merchants and manufacturers begin to have more power than monarchs, and they use the state, they use armed guards, they use military force in order to force peasants, feudal peasants, off their land into factories. William Blake writes about it. Karl Marx writes about it. Adam Smith writes about it. Like, capitalism it requires the state to function. If it doesn't have the state, it can't do what it wants to do. What do you think is going on in the world today in terms of the military? Why do you think the military gallivants around destroying places and stealing resources? They do it on behalf of the system of capital, which is exactly what they've always done. All right, we're good. If you're actually going to say something as dim-witted as Millie as a superhero, get the fuck out of here, dude. Poverty up 50% in like literally 6 months. Inflation up 200%. Like, you're just too stupid to talk to, bud. Bye. Get out of here. The U.S. ambassador to the UN got a community note for, wait for it, not knowing how the UN resolutions work. Could the fall of the U.S. empire be more blatant? Early today, their spokesperson also said it was non-binding, which was untrue. The emperor is naked. This is that lady, right? We all saw that black lady, right? She like 14 people would hold up their hands and be like, yes, ceasefire, and then she would be like, no, right? And then finally she was like, abstain, right? It's this soulless woman who I hope has big, long conversations with Lucifer. A ceasefire could begin immediately if Hamas would just release the first hostages. The international community must put pressure on Hamas to accept the deal on the table. Readers added context. The UNSC resolution is binding to all UN members. So this narrative that comes out of the State Department and is coming out of losers like this is that the ceasefire declaration was non-binding. It's binding, right? Like, it's so crazy to me. It's so crazy to me. I hope when all boomers pass away, so will the system of capitalism. No, that's not going to happen. The system of capital doesn't hinge on the boomers. I do think that the boomers dying off is going to be a shift. There's a lot of so just like clear ones, like way less boomers, way less millennials and Gen Z and Gen A believe that Jesus Christ is coming back at any moment. Like, that's a significant generational shift. Most people under the age of 40 believe that climate change is real. Like, that's another big shift, right? Yeah. Libertarians can never tell me how I'm going to pay rent in their precious anarchy. Yeah. No, I mean, look, libertarianism, and he basically admits it with this endorsement of Milley, which is just so, like, comical. Milley is a superhero. Unbelievable. This comical endorsement of a completely failed leader, who's going to go down in the history of Argentina as, like, a completely failed leader. Their entire position, like libertarians' entire position, is the best way to build a civil society is to destroy it. That's their whole position. And once you understand that, once you see it, right, like, it's naked. Like, when Ben Shapiro stands up and talks about dismantling programs in the state, right, it's like, and that'll somehow make everything better. We'll privatize it, and they'll be incentivized to do X, Y, and Z. And they have this whole, like, ridiculous, childish argument structure that basically boils down to the best way to build a civil society is to destroy the civil society. And it's all tied up in this idea of entitlements, that people need to prove that they shouldn't live in poverty, that people need to prove to guys like Ben Shapiro, to, like, weird little creepy fascists, that they should have food. It's wild, right? Like, you've got to prove to somebody that you should have food to eat. Like, it's crazy to me. The anarchist army with the anarchist conscription arrests the anarchist head of the anarchist state for breaking the anarchist... What are you writing here, June? The anarchist army with the anarchist conscription arrests the anarchist head of the anarchist state for breaking the anarchist law, and they throw them in the anarchist prison with anarchist rules, anarchist guards, anarchist bedtimes. Yeah, literally every time I start talking to libertarians about, like, what systems would you have, they literally just start describing the system we have. Like, they don't have ideas. They don't have thoughts. And it's just gotten really embarrassing to watch. In good news, yeah, even a black market needs a state, not a formal federal state. It'll be warlords. Yeah, right-wing libertarians want a black market utopia, no limits, no laws, no rules, no regulations, as if each one of those black marketers are not going to have their own militia and their own... Like, yeah, it's warlordism. Like, they're literally arguing in favor of feudalism. They're just like, what we need is free market capitalism. That doesn't look exactly like feudalism. Like... Millie Bros in shambles. But they're not. Right? They're not in shambles. They're just delusional. Like, they don't give a shit that all this suffering is happening. They don't care. Like, there just comes a point where you got to start to think that these guys are actually psychopathic. That they are actually sitting there being like, oh, all the suffering is good, actually. It's good that people are suffering. It's good that people are in pain. It's good that people are losing all of this wealth and losing all of this money. It's good that we're wasting an entire generation of people. It's good, actually. And it's good that we're funneling all of that wealth and money and prosperity into the hands of 5 people who then turn around and buy Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island to have sex with your children. That's good, actually. Right? Like, there just comes a point where you got to think that this is what these guys are actually defending. Because it sounds like it. Like, it sounds like it. There just comes a point where you got to think, like, when you're at home with, like, your wife, do you two laugh and giggle about the suffering that you're causing? Like, do you get off on it sexually? Is that what's happening? Because it seems like that's what's happening. Like, when a guy like Stephen Bunnell leaves this debate with Norm Finkelstein, like, do you like, he literally openly mocks genocide, people who are suffering from genocide on a stream. Like, I think these people are psychopaths. And I think the people who are defending them are trying to get in league with psychopaths. So it's just gotten completely wild. Yeah, you need to be productive to have value. Is basically the main message of capitalists. Well, yeah, and who determines what's productive and who determines what's valuable? A small group of psychopaths, right? So the entire society is completely bottlenecked. The entire society lives in this perpetual state of needing to ask permission to do anything from the least intelligent, least capable, least empathetic, least creative, least interesting people in the society, right? Their big achievement was being born in the right moment and being willing to exploit other people's labor for their own benefit. Like, that's their big achievement. So that they've done nothing. The moment they die, they'll be forgotten because they're essentially con men and grifters. The most important and influential of them will, like, be a footnote in the history books for helping the United States military, like, do things like militarize space. But, like, they themselves are basically just dim-witted frat boy losers who are unimportant and do nothing of value for anybody. So it's just, we live in this, like, perpetual state of a downward spiral because you can't actually get anything done. You can't actually achieve anything. That once the lie of capitalist innovation is shown to be true, which it's obviously the truth, like, capitalism produces just an enormous amount of waste because it's basically just these weird, kooky little feudal warlords bickering with one another and getting in each other's way. Right? There's no actual communication and there's no cooperation. So everybody's just reinventing the wheel over and over and over again and, like, committing corporate espionage against each other and undercutting one another, trying to get in each other's way. So any, like, actual progress that we've actually experienced under capitalism is in spite of all of this, not because of it. And it's just such a faff. It's just such a waste of time. Has a new bookshelf. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Eric writes, I finished reading the climate change article. Eric is talking about the climate change article I read yesterday, a huge article. I might actually bring it up just to show. If you guys haven't seen this article, this is my Discord, by the way. There it is. The Busy Worker's Handbook to the Apocalypse. This article, huge article, took 78-minute read. It took me like a while to read out loud. Loaded with information. And then, of course, goes on to, like, really go after the whole net zero movement and talk about our agricultural system, what climate change is going to mean for us. A really, 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 really important document, I think, just and, like, has got me to the point now where, like, if you're going to stand in front of me and say that climate change isn't real, then you're a flat earther. We don't need to have a conversation about it. Like, it's just gotten to be plain. John, I finished reading the climate change article. I find it interesting that he had a section about how fragile our global chain really is. Because I've been studying this topic recently, it only reinforces my argument about how fragile the capitalist system really is. It's only a matter of time before the whole thing collapses, and people wish they were lived during the Great Depression. Yeah, sounds like you did read that article. Yeah, it's like one of my favorite sections in the article. He starts talking about the food supply and food distribution, and that's scary as shit. But I think my favorite headline in the whole piece has got to be. It's section 7. Is it section 7? Come on. It's right here. It's on the tip of my brain. Yeah. From famine and fascism to collapse and extinction. Real, like, uplifting, like, not a good thing to read if you're just interested in coping. Right? Mikhail, what are you talking about? Oh, circle jerks are one-sided and misogynist, yeah. I read this out loud yesterday, and it was sobering. Sobering is the word that I would come with. I came away from it being like, we have to plant gardens. We have to be planting gardens. This is what we have to be doing. This is what we have to be doing. Right? We've got to be planting gardens, and we've got to be creating local systems. Because the system of global capitalism is going to come down at some point. And when it comes down, it's going to come down hard. It's not going to come down easy. So we got to be prepared. And to me, the number one thing that you should be doing is growing a garden. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that you can do, but the number one thing. Have I already gone through all my links? Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I've already gone through all my links. Yeah, relocalize. I think that's absolutely true. I think that's absolutely necessary. I think it's what we actually have to be focusing on, because the system, capitalism disconnects you from the prerequisites for life and then reconnects you through a market. It's time to bypass capitalism, disconnect from markets, grow your own food. I really, really think it's going to be like, it's going to be necessary, and we should at least be practicing it. Like, that to me is what it's really about, practicing it. That it's not about, like, because you don't want to be scrambling around trying to do that kind of stuff while the famine is on you. Right? Like, you want to be doing that stuff. Like, you want to be doing that stuff. Oh, yeah. See this article when you have time. Ukraine needs to open up about hard truths from battlefield, U.S. diplomat says in Politico. They just gotta get that thing done, man. They gotta finish this negotiation, right? They gotta close it all down. But, like, NATO keeps rattling the saber, talking about sending troops and going to war, right? It's just nuts. It's just insane. Community gardens are greater than personal gardens, but don't let that stop you. At this point, it's every little bit helps. Here, let's look up this article that Has a New Bookshelf has said, because I've run out of links. I have run out of links. Ukraine needs to open up about hard truths from battlefield, U.S. diplomat says Politico. Boop. Sometimes the Ukrainian government may resist the kind of freedom of information that's normal for us. A senior U.S. diplomat responsible for countering disinformation says Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky should be more open to disclosing information about the state of the war in Ukraine. The advice comes as fighting intensifies amid Russian gains in key areas and waning international focus on the conflict. James Rubin leads the U.S. State Department's Global Engagement Center, which highlights propaganda and disinformation efforts by hostile states and other actors targeting America and its allies around the world. Talking to Politico's Power Play podcast, Rubin said, "Sometimes the Ukrainian government may resist the kind of freedom of information that's normal for us. Some days, war reporters report things that aren't necessarily in the interest of Vladimir Zelensky," he continued, "but in a democracy that we hope and increasingly see Ukraine becoming, they can understand that having war reporters cover the war, even if occasionally there's bad news, is far better than the controlled environment that Russia has placed on all of its people." It's such a weird article, man. Like Ukraine is like this rump state that exists in like a kind of a perpetual state of needing to obfuscate itself. Like, Ukraine needs to obfuscate itself from the rest of the world. They can't really be showing the truth of what's going on, because they're like crazy people. Like huge amounts of them love Stepan Bandera, and like I think if Ukraine actually started reporting honestly on what was going on, you'd see a lot more Nazis. Like, I think they've got a real problem. Hale, how you doing? I think this is your first time here. Good to see you, my man. What's my opinion on nukes and disarmament after Ukraine? I think it would be a good idea. I think it's always been a good idea to disarm. I think that it's insane that we have these nukes floating around, right? I think it's sort of wild that that we've permitted ourselves to have like these kill switches where let's just have a button we can press to destroy all human life. Good idea, right? Good idea. And we should disarm. Reagan was a disarmament champion. Reagan, for God's sakes, was disarming. So, like, it's something that we used to do. It's something that we could do. It's something that we should do. But since the Bush era, we've just been ramping the Cold War back up because we've lost our minds. Like, we're just a lunatic culture, and we can't really help ourselves. Like, we don't really have anything else. We don't have a culture. We don't really have thoughts or ideas. Right? All we really do is war and theft and destruction. And it's all we've ever really done is enslavement, you know? That's really our culture. We have this very, like, warrior, Spartan sort of idea of what a culture should look like. And every so often you have, like, a little spark up of culture, and you find out that it comes because, like, a group of people got together and thought, hey, we should do something nice and make some nice things, right? That lasts for a period of time until the actual culture of the West kicks up, which is war and death and destruction. So since 9/11, we've been regressing. I think that we've been regressing since way, like, when I take a look at the history of America, you basically end up with World War II. Oh God, you could go back to, like, the Civil War if you wanted to, but you basically end up with, let's say World War II is the big moment, right? You have the Great Depression, World War II, so you have a whole generation of people who live in poverty and grinding despair, who go through this just, like, hellish war, right? World War II is like a demonic thing that we did to a people. The idea that we took some of these people, and the Soviets got it way worse than we did, but, like, the idea that we put men through this hellish, like, it if anything should show you that capitalists are psychopaths, it's World War II, right? And we took these guys, put them through World War II. They came home, and they basically started a revolution, right? That's how we ended up with the New Deal. And of course, I criticized the revolutionaries because they allowed the capitalists to keep the means of production. And but we got the New Deal, and basically since the New Deal was put in, the system of capital has been working to regress it, right? Basically since day one. So, like, the moment the New Deal comes in, capitalist forces get erected to regress it, and we've been regressing it ever since. Right? This is why I don't go for social democracy or the social democracy argument, because the capitalists within all societies will work to regress the society, because capitalism is, by its very definition, a destructive and devastating slavery force. So it's just so the whole regress, like, 9/11 was a big spike moment because it allowed them to pass a lot of fascist legislation, like Homeland Security, right? All of that kind of shit. Like, it's all very, like, darkly fascist. The Patriot Act, that's a good one. So there was, like, a big spike up that happened post 9/11 for sure. Yeah, mid-20th century, they've been rolling back as much of the New Deal as possible. The goal is to just get rid of it all. Social Security, all of it, right? It's a policy of extraction and abandonment. That's what it is. Nukes are what the good guys fight a supervillain over to prevent in my fantasy world, yeah. Like, two years ago, Biden said F-16 to Ukraine means nuclear war. I might be mistaken. He might have been talking about a no-fly zone. Like, the Ukraine situation is fascinating because it's not going to actually end, right? Like, there might be a signing of documents and a declaration and, like, a redrawing of the border, but Europe isn't going to just go, okay, doopy-doo, right? And be like, well, that's over. That's not going to happen. There's been some very significant things that have happened over this war. And I think that NATO is walking away from it humiliated. I don't think that it's raising an existential crisis within NATO itself. I don't think anybody within NATO, yeah, they really, like, literally, they burned the bridges. Like, they bombed the Nord Stream pipeline, right? Like, that to me is, like, I connect what's going on in Israel right now in Gaza to the Ukraine war, because very recently they found huge natural gas deposits in the Gaza Strip, right, off the coast of the Gaza Strip. And so you have a war over here, right, in Ukraine, where the Nord Stream pipeline is bombed in the Baltic Sea, the pipeline that was connecting Moscow to Berlin. That's how Germany was getting its natural gas. It was getting it from Russia. The Americans bombed the shit out of that, cutting off that natural gas. And so where does Germany turn to get its natural gas? It turns to India, right? Which, hilariously, India doesn't produce natural gas. Where's it getting its natural gas from? Russia. So Russia gives gas to India, which gives gas to Germany. So instead of it being, whoop, this easy connection, it's whoop, whoop, whoop. Of course, India denies it. But and so this increases the cost of natural gas in a huge way. It's causing a crisis in Germany, an ongoing, unfolding natural gas crisis. And so America, and this all happens because America says, "Don't worry about it. We're gonna replace that natural gas. We're gonna provide the natural gas." Well, how are they providing the natural gas? That's how they're providing the natural gas. So, like, and they're putting a pier here. They're, like, building infrastructure now. Yeah, and there's oil there as well. So, like, you've got... I find this so funny when people start asking me, like, John, do you think World War II is going to start? We're in World War II, World War III. Is World War III going to kick off? This is World War III, baby. Like, this is it. You're in it, right? We're watching World War III happen right now, right? We're watching, like, here's a front, right? Here's one of the fronts of World War III. Here's another front, right? Here's a front right here, right? The East China Sea, the South China Sea. Right, you've got military bases all up in this area. They're very, very clearly building a front here to confront China. Right, you have a front here. This whole area here is just a disaster catastrophe that essentially puts, like, a smoke screen. Right, like, this is just a clusterfuck disaster space, but it does create a, like, neutral zone, if you like, where superpowers can't really get in here and can't really build anything. That it's going to require, like, decades of reconstruction to actually get anything meaningful. Like, they don't want, like, an Ottoman Empire here. They don't want that. Which is why they still talk about getting into Iran. Because they want to destroy Iran. They want to break Iran apart like they destroyed Libya, right? Like, they want to get in there and destroy Iran. Because if the Ottoman Empire or something like it were to reconstruct itself at this stage in the game, it's probably going to come out of Iran, right? It's probably going to be Iran that formulates something like that. And they don't want to see that. So they're going to destroy this, right? This is part of World War III. This is part of the whole thing. And so here you have, like, a front line. They're, like, surrounding. It's a containment strategy against China. And now they've got a containment strategy against Russia. And it also pays to remember, like, this map doesn't really give you a sense of it, but, like, this is also a front line, right? The line between Russia and Canada, right? Like, if you go up here, you come out there. So that's another front line right here. And this is World War III. Like, it's already unfolding. It's already happening. It just doesn't look like World War II. And World War II didn't look like World War I. And, like, And once you, because our news media reports on things in a very disconnected kind of a way. In a very like, this event happened and then this event happened and then this event happened, and they're just disconnected events that have no relationship to one another. But once you understand that it's all a single unfolding event that has things that occur, like when you watch a show, like when you watch a movie or a play or something, there's scenes, right? That two characters come together and have a conversation and there's a scene, right? Well, every event that occurs is a single scene in this unfolding drama that is World War III, no doubt. And I would argue that this war that we're looking at, this World War III that we're looking at, is more of a world war than the previous ones were, right? Like World War I and World War II were primarily European wars, right? That you get Russia folded into it, of course, but it's like primarily this. You can sort of point at things that happen elsewhere, where like Egypt sends a certain amount of troops, so like Zambia sends a certain amount, and I think a lot of these places didn't really exist in the way that they exist now. And so like there's a moment where like this group sends something, or there's like one event that happens. But now it really is getting to be like everyone's involved in this thing. Like everyone's sending troops, everybody's sending resources. It's a globalized economy. Everything's happening in this way, and capitalism can only resolve itself through war. Right? Capitalism can only resolve these crises from war. Right? And like we've already got confrontations. Like the confrontation between Ukraine and Russia, the confrontation that happened in Libya, the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war. Right? These are all part of one long unfolding catastrophe that is itself World War III. And it's like everybody kind of has to tiptoe around because there's also nukes on the stage. And it's all just one big, long push towards total catastrophe. Because that's the only thing capitalism can do, is generate catastrophes for itself. Yeah, Russian, Canadian fighters play chicken with each other in the Arctic. Yeah, same for Americans and Russians in Alaska, of course. Right? Like, they're spending all this money on military equipment. They should use it. Which is just like, it's just cowboy shit, right? Like, it's just the dumbest shit. And we don't have any sense. I can't imagine Russia and China going into direct conflict with the United States. I mean, the United States itself has stated what its objective is with China, should they get into a conflict with China. And their objective is to destroy China's shipping trade. Like, they want to isolate China. And they're very concerned about the fact that China is becoming this massive trading partner. And so their strategy is to destroy Chinese trade in the South China Sea and in the East China Sea by blowing up all their boats, right? And now they're also having to deal with the reality of the Belt and Road Initiative, right? And the Belt and Road Initiative is what is allowing China to get into Europe and is allowing China to get goods into Europe so effectively. And as you can see, this is an old map too. They're starting to build more rail into Africa, and their goal is to get this Belt and Road Initiative into Africa. Because they know what the Americans' plan is, because the Americans published the document. It's called Thinking Through the Unthinkable War with China. You can look it up. It comes out of the Rand Corporation. They're very explicit what a war with China would look like. Literally blow up all their trade, right? Exchange American blood for gold, basically. And so China's response to that is to build all this rail and to go crazy with all this rail. And now that, to me, is the very heart of geopolitics at this stage in the game. Like, if you look, China has made a huge push into Africa. I think that's one of the reasons why China has done that. But I also think that, like, China has it feels as though, like, China is a Marxist they use Marxism in their economic analysis, right? Like they're not illiterate. They actually take a look at reality, and they think to themselves, Africa has a ton of resources, like just a mountain upon mountain of resources, and they want access to those resources, right? So they're going into Africa and they're making good deals with the Africans, right? And I think the most interesting thing that's happening in regards to this Belt and Road Initiative is actually happening in Saudi Arabia. I'll say it over and over again. Saudi Arabia is a Machiavellian evil genius. They're always on the right side of power. Maybe not quote unquote on the right side of history, right? Like they don't have the moral high ground, but they don't care. That's not what they're in for. They want to be on the right side of power, and they always are. It's actually fascinating to take a look at the history of Arabia, right? And currently what's called Saudi Arabia, because it's always the truth. They're always on the correct side of power, and they always do it through these like really genius Machiavellian systems. So what's happening? I think this is going to be better if I pull up this map. So right in this section right here, they are building a city that they are calling Neom. And the city is going to be like one big long line. It's what they call the line, right? It's going to be big skyscraper, tall, reflective walls, basically. And it's going to be a big line, for a rail to go through. But they're not talking about a rail. They're not saying it's a rail. That's not what they're saying. They're calling it a futuristic, vertically integrated city is what they're calling it. And when they pitch it, that's how they discuss it. And you can just Google, let's just Google it, right? Like I could just show you this. Like I know it sounds like I'm making this up, Neom project, but this is something that's actually happening in Saudi Arabia. This is Neom, right? Here's the current way that they're doing it. Located in the temperate northwest of Saudi Arabia, Neom's diverse climate offers both sun-soaked beaches and snow-capped mountains. Like they're come on. Show me the thing. All right. They're not actually here we go. Like no. That's not what we're looking for. Come on. You guys are being coy with me now. You guys are being coy. This is all the... Oh, here you go. Yeah, here you are. Neom. Doink. 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 What the fuck are you doing? How coy can you get? Changing the future of construction and design. Leading the world in future-proof capital projects and infrastructure. Future-proof. What do you think future-proof means? Neom to become carbon neutral. They've got a whole carbon neutral thing, which is totally a bunch of bullshit. There's one picture that I think really captures this, and they're being really coy with it. Here, maybe I could just find the picture. Neom project images. Yeah, here we go. Here you go. This is sort of the goal. This is the picture, right? The vision, and this is kind of what they're building already, right? So the goal here, anyway, this is a big long way of saying the goal here is to get this thing built so that they can connect it to the Belt and Road Initiative, so that they can get under, I think they're going to build it under. I don't think they're going to build a bridge. I think they're going to build it under the Gulf of Aqaba, and then get it into Egypt so that it can connect to the Suez Canal, right? And of course to Cairo, and then into the rest of Africa. And the reason why they have to do this is because of Israel and the way Israel is positioned. Look at how Israel is positioned. That border right there. That means that you can't get a rail through it. And America will never allow you to put a rail through Israel, right? And so China has to buddy up to Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia gets to buddy up with China, gets to pivot away from America towards China, right? Always on the right side of history. And And also what Saudi Arabia has done in order to secure this, and I think this is just evil genius 2.0 shit, they're literally creating conflict and creating destruction in Yemen so that the Chinese can't do the same idea or the same thing here, to make it go from Sana'a down here and connect this way, right? Because China could just work with Yemen, right? You could just get something going on through the Gulf of Oman from Iran, who they already have the Belt and Road Initiative connected to. So getting stuff connected here to Oman and Yemen, well, Saudi Arabia destroys Oman and Yemen and destabilizes this region. Why do they do that? So China can't work with them, right? Destabilization works this way. And so Saudi Arabia is basically the last place. They've created a circumstance and a situation where they're basically saying to China, you want to get that rail into Africa and connect that rail directly through land from Africa all the way to China? You want to do that? You got to work with us. And this is what we're willing to invest in it. This is what we're willing to do. This is what we're willing to commit. We're willing to commit to this kind of infrastructure to make that happen. Because Saudi Arabia knows that if they just charge the smallest, tiniest, itsy bitsy, teeniest, little tiny fee, every single trade that comes through this city, itsy bitsy tiny, like 0.1%, they're going to make $100 trillion just for having done it. So Saudi Arabia is taking all of its oil money, right, putting it into renewable energy and putting it into infrastructure projects so that when they step into the next phase of reality, should we exist and should we survive it, they'll have future-proof cities. So America's looking at all of that I just said. All of that. And they're thinking, we got to stop that. Right? And America's plan during the middle of all of this surrounds Israel and the idea of creating a greater Israel. Right? That Israel actually expands its borders. There's rumors that they're building what's called the Ben Gvir corridor, where they actually straight up dig. They dig through from the Mediterranean Sea to the not the Dead Sea directly, but it's this river, right? They dig and connect to the river so they can create a canal, a canal system. So they can create a canal system that rivals the Suez Canal, right? And then, of course, they'll probably work to destroy the Suez Canal so that they'll have... Because this section here, where they put Israel, like this whole Israel thing is actually from like a straight up strategic, like where should we put our military base in the Middle East? They couldn't have picked a better spot. This little piece of land is so important geopolitically. It's insane how important it is. It connects Africa to the Middle East. And this canal is so important because if you're living in Italy and you want to do trade with India, right? You can go through the canal, right? And it's like just like that. Whereas if you don't have it, you got to go all the fucking way around, and it's huge. It's a pain in the ass. Hasn't trade been going on in this region for like 3,000 years? Sure. Solomon talked to create the new robot state like Neom. Okay. I think that's the cradle of civilization. Where does the Tigris and Euphrates cross? The English drew those lines in the sand and made these countries after the Ottomans lost in World War I. Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys talking about? So yeah, put that in the Discord, Eric. I'd definitely be willing to read that. I mean, not right now, obviously, because we're getting to the end of the show, but you should check out what's going on with the Panama Canal and climate change. The Panama Canal and climate change. Panama Canal grapples with climate change threat. Global shipping crisis. The Panama Canal is running dry. Bro, what a disaster that would be. Straight up, like what are they going to do? What are they going to do if that happens? Dude, that's crazy to think about. Like just not being able to get ships through the Panama Canal. I honestly, I gotta be real straight with you. I think that if that shit started to happen, the like the West is gonna come in there with dynamite and blow the shit out of it. Just you'll get like George Bush, or not George Bush. You'll get like Donald Trump just being like, "Why don't we just take Panama and just blow it up? We can nuke Panama. We'll just nuke corridors. What we'll do is we'll bury nuclear bombs underneath Panama City and underneath Panama, and we'll just set off a chain of nuclear bombs, and that'll part the land and let the water through. Just let the water through." Yeah, I mean, America be like that. Someone paid $4 million for a prize spot in the queue to get through recently, set a new record. Jeez. For months, a withering drought has created major traffic jams at the Panama Canal. The drought, which may have been exacerbated by climate change, has left the canal's water levels lower than ever, forcing Panama to let fewer ships through. The restrictions have led to delays, increased shipping costs, and uncertainty over the future of one of the world's critical trade checkpoints. This has fundamentally changed how shipping through the canal works, said Soren Stokebake Anderson, a regional commercial manager at Leth Agencies, a shipping agency. It's also disrupted the international shipping industry. Roughly 5% of the world's seaborne trade passes through the canal, which is the gateway of 40% of the U.S. container traffic. As Panama heads into the dry season, when restrictions will be tightened further, shipping companies have long relied on the canal, are bracing for even worse delays, and are trying to reroute. This has created a fraught logistical puzzle amid a simultaneous maritime crisis in the world's other main shipping shortcut, the Suez Canal, which is roiled by war in the Middle East. As climate extremes become more common, shipping companies, analysts, and governments fear the Panama Canal crisis may not be an aberration, but the new reality. Scrambling to deliver their goods on time has led shipping companies to question whether the canal will remain a reliable artery of global trade, and sparked renewed interest in finding themselves alternatives to the canal. Yeah, they'll just get together and blow it up. Right? They'll just get together and blow it up. What alternative do you got? What's your alternative? Right? Like, this is just blow it up. Just plant the nukes, right? We all know you want to. Just blow the shit out of it. America! Fuck yeah! Oh. They tried nuclear fracking. What happened? Gonna save the motherfucking day, yeah, America! Fuck yeah! Like, I just feel like it's what they do, right? Like, it's just how America rolls. Just blow it up. Like when Donald Trump said that they should nuke the hurricane, right? Like, that's essentially their plan here. To just blow the shit absolutely out of this. To create a corridor. You know, guys, I think I'm going to call it early today. I've got to go into work tomorrow. I think I'm going to go to sleep. Yeah. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Revolt. Rebel. Repent. Good luck.